Well, hello, everybody, and I'd like to take a few minutes to speak with you today about the rough draft review and the fact that over the course of the next week, you're all going to be receiving back any rough drafts that might have been submitted for the completion of the final research proposal or research paper in which you're working on within your courses for this term. And the end of the term is rapidly approaching us, and that ultimately does mean our final submissions of all those assignments are due as well. So as we begin, we're just going to take a look for a few minutes at how to treat the rough draft as you receive it back from your instructor over the course of the next week. So as it comes back, the first thing you're going to want to do is take a look at all the feedback that's been provided by your instructor. There are a few different areas in which you can receive feedback. For example, the inline comments that they might make as they're reading your paper. You can receive feedback on the rubric itself or in the rubric comments. So you want to take a look at all those areas and make sure that you have reviewed all that feedback. Then, if peer review was a part of your rough draft process, as the peer review comes in over the course of the next week, you're going to want to make sure that you also review that and are incorporating any of those ideas and suggestions within the overall work itself. Now, as you review all this feedback, the first thing you're going to want to do is take note as you review it of anything that might be noted on several different occasions. You know, if there's a constant reference to an area in which improvement is needed or an issue that's been noted within your work, and maybe it's related to something as content or something like grammar or sentence structure or anything like that. But you're going to want to pay attention to those repetitious comments and that feedback because that is definitely an area you want to address. Okay. You're also going to want to look for those comments that might reference something along the lines of this is an issue throughout your paper. Okay. If there's any type of reference to that suggestion in the feedback, you're going to want to take note of what that issue is and ultimately focus on correcting it. Once you have a familiarity with all the feedback, you're then going to want to revisit your work with a focus on the feedback. So now you're actually going to start to read the work and see how that feedback can be incorporated into the work. And as you do that, you want to keep an open mind because remember, whether it's peer review, instructor comments, or anything like that, the comments are directed towards the work. Okay? It should not be taken personal, and everything is ultimately designed and geared towards making your work better. You know, one of the things that I've consistently said over the last several weeks is the fact that in the writing process, we are always improving. We are always making ourselves better, so to speak, at that process. So you want to keep that in mind as you work on your revisions and ultimately focus on what those revisions should look like. Then you're going to work on completing your revisions. Now, how do you complete your revisions? Well, there's a couple different ways that you're going to do this. First, you could take a look at those revisions and make sure that you have everything in the work in which you need to move forward. In order to do this, you're going to take a look at the rubric for the final submission. One thing I will draw your attention to is the fact that the rubrics for the rough draft and the final submission are very different. The reason for that is the rough draft is not necessarily designed to be a completed copy. For example, you might have referenced in your rough draft where you were headed. You might have provided an outline for your instructor. So now that means as you make your revisions on your rough draft, you're going to incorporate and finish that writing process. All right. And the other thing I would call your attention to when you're working on revisions, if your rough draft comes back and you did an excellent job on the rough draft, that does not mean that revisions are not necessary for the final submission. Why do I say that? Well, again, when you look at the rubric for the final draft, it is very, very different. There's additional components to the rubric for the final project in your final draft. So keep those ideas in mind. The rough draft is, as I've said on several occasions in previous webinars, is rough. Now you're focusing on working towards finishing that project. And that's what you're doing as you work towards your final draft. So you also want to make sure that all of your work is in line with the rubric. If there was an area on the rough draft that was noted as missing, you want to make sure that you've corrected that area, have it included in the final draft, and also have any other type of supporting details. Because one of the things about a rubric and the way in which rubrics are written is some of the areas do rely on one another. So again, when you're looking at the rubric, make sure that you've met all of those areas and all of that pertinent information that is needed is located within the final submission. So as you get your rough drafts back, or your rough drafts back, you're going to want to go ahead and work on. I will use the term perfecting those because that is ultimately what we are working towards as you complete your overall work. If you needed issues in assistance related to the writing process, I would encourage you to utilize the Writing Center. There is a link in Blackboard to the Writing Center, and you can go ahead and access that, set up a session with them, frequently asked questions. They offer assistance. So what I would recommend is that you not wait. As we get closer to the end of the term, they're going to get busier and busier. So if you need that assistance, definitely reach out to them and get that session scheduled so that when you get your rough draft back over the course of this next week, you will then be ready to go ahead and move forward with getting that assistance that you need. Writing style, one thing that you do want to double check for is formatting as it relates to Turabian format. And part two is the area of source citation, bibliographic citations, footnotes, all those key areas related to the formatting process are a key element that is needed within your final draft. So make sure that you have a solid understanding of Turabian. Do have the link there for the Chicago style as well. If you're utilizing the Chicago style in terms of the manual instead of the Turabian manual, part three is documentation. Will also provide assistance there. So whichever you are utilizing in the course of your term, definitely make sure that you are referencing it and have perfected the formatting style. And one of the things we always talk about is the fact that as we move forward in the writing process and as we move forward in your courses, Turabian format does get more and more intense. And with each milestone, you should be improving. And I would also focus and make a reference to the fact that as you prepare your final submissions, review your previous milestones. Take a look at any issues that might have been highlighted relating to grammar, related to writing, cover pages, things like that. Because if you can correct them as you get to the final draft, that is a great way to incorporate previous feedback into your final draft. Because as I mentioned, over the course of the term, your writing should be getting better and better as it relates to both grammar and content. And ultimately, Turabian formatting is an area of that as well. And that is something that you will continue to use throughout the program. So the better familiarity you gain with it within the course early in your academic career, the better you'll be later in your academic career as it relates to formatting style. Keep in mind if you are in either 501 or 502, the two differences between those two courses. In 501, you're focusing on interpretation because you're writing that research paper. In 502, you are not writing a research paper, you are writing a research proposal. Two very different ideas. And that is something that you will want to make sure that you definitely have down pat in your final draft as well. A review of those ideas is available at that link. There is a video regarding the differences between the research paper and the research proposal in case you do have issues with that as you move towards final submission. With that said, if there's any way I can help you, please visit the learning community, post your questions. I will be more than happy to help you any way that I can. As you get the feedback back from your instructor, if you have questions, reach out to them. They can help you, they can explain anything, and they are waiting to hear from you. Have a great day.